I never would have guessed that a simple call to fix a broken furnace on a freezing February morning would lead me to the shocking discovery that my brother had been living in my basement for 4 years. It still sounds unbelievable when I say it out loud, but that's exactly what happened. A faulty heater ended up turning my entire life upside down. My name is Gerald Hoffman, and at 63 years old, I believed I'd already seen just about everything life could throw at me. I'd spent 38 years married to my wife, Sandra. Together we raised 2 wonderful kids, who eventually moved away, one to Vancouver and the other to Calgary. I spent most of my working life as an accountant here in Winnipeg. Sandra and I lived in a comfortable 2-story house in River Heights, the same home we'd purchased back in 1989. Our life has become steady, quiet, and honest, exactly the way I liked it. Then came a Tuesday morning in February of 2023. The day everything shifted. Overnight the temperature plunged to -35, and naturally our furnace chose that exact moment to stop working. Sandra had flown out 3 days earlier to Vancouver to help our daughter Emma with her newborn baby, so the house was empty except for me. I'd been working from home ever since the pandemic began, settling into a routine that rarely changed. That morning around 9 o'clock, I picked up the phone and called Morrison Heating and Cooling. The dispatcher told me they could have someone at my place by noon. Right on time, a technician showed up. A young fellow named Kyle, probably in his late 20s, with that easygoing Manitoba accent. "Mr. Hoffman, I'm here to check the furnace," he said as he stepped inside, knocking the snow from his boots by the front door. "Good timing," I replied. "The house is cooling down faster than I expected." I pointed toward the basement stairs. "The furnace room's straight ahead. You'll see it right away." Kyle grabbed his toolbox and headed downstairs while I returned to my home office to wrap up a client's tax return. Since I'd been working from home since the pandemic started, interruptions like this were pretty normal. About 20 minutes later, my phone vibrated on my desk. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Hoffman, this is Kyle, the technician. Could you come downstairs for a moment? There's something you should see." I stared at the message, confused. Why text me instead of just calling up the stairs? I typed back, "What's wrong? Is the furnace shot?" 3 dots popped up on the screen, disappeared, then appeared again. A moment later, his reply finally came through. "It's not the furnace," the message read. "There's a door down here behind your storage shelves. It's secured with 4 different locks on the outside. Did you know about it?" I stared at the screen, completely baffled. A door? We'd lived in this house for 34 years. I knew every corner of it. There was absolutely no door behind those storage shelves. I typed back quickly. "There's no door in the basement. You must be seeing something else." His reply came almost instantly. "Sir, I'm standing right in front of it, and I swear I can hear something on the other side. Maybe breathing, or pipes shifting, I'm not sure. But it's strange. You should probably come down here." My heart immediately began racing. I pushed back from my desk so quickly that my chair rolled across the room and slammed into the wall. Without another thought, I rushed out of the office and headed straight for the basement stairs. When I reached the bottom, Kyle was standing along the far wall where we kept several metal shelving units stacked with Christmas decorations, old tax records, and Sandra's crafting supplies. One of the shelves had been pulled away from the wall. "I had to move this to get at the ductwork," he said, gesturing toward the space he'd cleared. That's when I noticed it. And there it was. A wooden door painted the exact same dull gray as the basement walls. If you weren't specifically looking for it, it would have blended in perfectly. But the thing that made my blood turn cold wasn't the door itself. It was the locks. 4 heavy-duty padlocks lined the outside of the door, one beneath the other. Every single one of them was locked. I've never seen this before," I murmured, my voice barely rising above a whisper. Kyle looked at me, his expression shifting to concern. "You didn't have it installed?" "No," I said quickly. "We've never remodeled the basement, not once since we bought the house." I stepped a little closer, my hand shaking as I reached out and touched the surface of the door. It was real, solid wood, sturdy and cold beneath my fingers. And then I heard it too, a faint noise coming from the other side. Not loud, just the subtle sound of movement, like someone adjusting their stance, like someone was standing right there, only a few inches away, on the other side of that door. "Hello," I called out, my voice cracking as the word left my throat. "Is someone in there?" Nothing. Complete silence. But it wasn't the kind of silence that felt empty. It felt like the kind of silence someone makes when they're holding their breath. Kyle immediately took out his phone. "Mr. Hoffman, I think we should call the police." "Wait," I said, even though I didn't really know why I stopped him. My thoughts were spinning wildly. Who on earth could be behind that door? How long had it even been there? And more importantly, how had I never noticed it before? Then a realization slammed into me like a speeding train. Sandra. She had been the one who organized all the storage down here. She was always the one insisting I didn't need to dig through the Christmas decorations or the craft supplies. Over the years, Sandra had spent far more time in the basement than I ever had. "Let me call my wife first," I said, pulling out my phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Kyle looked uneasy. "Sir, if someone is locked in there, just give me 1 minute," I insisted. I dialed Sandra's number. It rang 4 times before she answered. "Gerald, is everything all right?" she asked, sounding light and relaxed. In the background, I could hear Emma's baby crying. "Sandra," I said slowly, "there's a door in our basement behind the storage shelves, and it has locks on it. Do you know anything about this?" The line suddenly went dead quiet. Even the sound of the baby crying had vanished. A second later, it dawned on me that she must have stepped away somewhere private. "Gerald." Her voice was completely different now. Flat, controlled, almost icy. "Don't open that door." My stomach twisted into a knot. "Sandra, what the hell is going on? Who's in there?" I said, "Don't open it," she snapped sharply. "Just wait until I get home. We'll talk about this when I get back." "Talk about what?" "Sandra, there's someone locked in our basement. How long has this been here?" Another long, suffocating silence filled the line. When she finally spoke again, her voice was so faint I could barely hear it. 4 years. The words hit me like a blow to the chest. I thought I was going to be sick. 4 years. The words echoed in my head. 4 years. "Who is it?" I demanded. "Gerald. Please," she said urgently. "Just trust me. Don't open that door. I'm booking a flight right now. I'll be home tonight, and we'll deal with this together." "Deal with what?" "Sandra, I'm calling the police." "No," she shouted into the phone. "If you call the police, you'll regret it. Gerald, I'm begging you, just wait for me." I ended the call. My hands were trembling so badly I could hardly keep hold of the phone. Kyle stood there staring at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Mr. Hoffman, call 911, I told him. Within 15 minutes, 2 police cars pulled up outside. Officers Chen and Dubois introduced themselves before following us down into the basement. I told them everything, the furnace repair, discovering the hidden door, the call to my wife, and the way she had reacted. Officer Chen crouched down to inspect the padlocks while Officer Dubois went upstairs with me to take my statement. A few minutes later, Chen's voice echoed down the stairs. "Mr. Hoffman, we need the keys for these locks, and we need them now." "I don't have them," I replied helplessly. "I didn't even know that door was there until an hour ago." "Where's your wife?" "Vancouver," I said. "But she's trying to catch a flight back." Officer Chen exchanged a brief glance with his partner. "Sir, we can't wait for that. If someone is possibly in danger behind this door, we have to open it right away." They went back to their patrol car and returned with a pair of heavy bolt cutters. It took them almost 20 minutes to get through all 4 padlocks. With every lock that clattered to the floor, it felt like another piece of my reality was falling apart. 38 years of marriage. What in God's name had Sandra done? When the final lock snapped loose, Officer Chen turned to me. "Mr. Hoffman, I need you to go upstairs while we check what's inside." "No," I said firmly. "This is my house. I need to see." He studied my face for a long moment before finally giving a small nod. "Stay behind me." Slowly he pushed the door open. The smell reached us first. Thick, stale air mixed with something else I couldn't quite place. Officer Chen switched on his flashlight and swept the beam across the room. It was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. A cot stood against one wall, the blanket carefully arranged. There was a small battery-powered lamp nearby. a bucket with a lid tucked into the corner, stacks of books piled neatly, and a folding table covered with notebooks and pencils. And sitting on the cot, squinting in the sudden brightness, was my brother, Thomas. "Thomas," I whispered, the name barely leaving my lips. My brother Thomas, the same brother I had been told died 4 years ago. The same man Sandra had wept for at his funeral. He looked awful. His hair had turned completely gray, even though he was only 58. He had lost at least 40 pounds. His skin was pale, almost see-through from years without sunlight. But there was no doubt about it. It was him. "Jerry," he said, his voice weak and strange, almost unfamiliar. "You found me." The next few minutes are mostly a blur. I think I staggered backward at some point. Officer Chen was already calling for an ambulance. Officer Dubois was on his radio, requesting backup. Kyle, the furnace technician, stood frozen at the top of the basement stairs, staring down like he'd just witnessed something impossible. When the paramedics arrived, they rushed straight to Thomas and began checking his vital signs. He was severely malnourished, badly dehydrated, and showing clear signs of vitamin D deficiency and muscle wasting. Yet somehow, unbelievably, he was still alive. After 4 years locked away in my basement, he had survived. At the hospital, once they had stabilized him and started fluids, Thomas finally told us what had happened. 4 years earlier, he had been going through a painful divorce from his wife of 20 years. On top of that, he had made several poor investments that wiped out most of his savings. Desperate to get back on his feet, he came to Sandra and me, asking for help with a loan. I wasn't home when he arrived. I had been in Toronto for a week-long work conference. According to Thomas, Sandra welcomed him inside and said we would talk about the loan when I returned. She made him a cup of tea. That was the last thing he remembered before waking up in the small room in the basement. At first he thought it was some kind of nightmare. Sandra came down later that first day and explained everything through the locked door. She told him he was a burden, that he had always been a burden to our family. She said I spent far too much time worrying about him, helping him, rescuing him, whenever he got into trouble. She claimed she was protecting our marriage, safeguarding our retirement, even protecting me from what she called my own soft heart. She told him she had already reported him missing. Everyone believed he had run away to escape his debts and the collapse of his marriage. Eventually, she said, enough time would pass that he'd be declared legally dead, and everyone, including me, would move on. After that, she brought him food once a day, usually very early in the morning before I ever woke up. She had even installed a small ventilation system that connected to the outside, cleverly disguised as a dryer vent. She gave him books to read, notebooks to write in, and a battery-powered lamp that she would recharge for him. She even brought down a bucket for waste and emptied it every day. "Why didn't you scream?" I asked him, tears running down my face. "Why didn't you pound on the walls?" "I was right upstairs, Thomas. Right upstairs for 4 years." He stared down at his hands, and for the first time I noticed how badly his fingers were shaking. "She told me she'd kill you if I made a sound," he said quietly. "She would show me news stories on her phone. Husbands who died suddenly, heart attacks, accidents, mysterious deaths. She said it would be easy, just a little something in your coffee one morning." He swallowed hard before continuing. "She said, as long as I stayed quiet, you'd stay safe." The police arrested Sandra at the Winnipeg airport when her flight landed later that evening. She didn't even try to deny what she had done. According to the detective who questioned her, she had been planning Thomas's captivity for months before he ever came asking us for help. The hidden room had been built by a contractor while I was away on another business trip 2 years before Thomas disappeared. She told them it was meant to be a wine cellar, and paid them in cash so it wouldn't appear on any official records. When investigators asked her why she had done it, her answer was chillingly simple. "Thomas was always the problem," she said. "Even when we were kids, Gerald was constantly cleaning up Thomas's mistakes. I gave Gerald a good life, a stable life. Thomas would have destroyed that. I did what I had to do to protect what we built." The trial quickly turned into a national spectacle. Newspapers across Canada ran headlines calling it the Basement Brother case. Sandra was eventually sentenced to 25 years for unlawful confinement, assault, and several additional charges. Her lawyer tried to argue diminished capacity, but the evidence of planning was impossible to ignore. The hidden room, the supplies she had prepared, the 4 years of captivity, it was all far too deliberate. Thomas spent 3 months in the hospital. Recovering physically was difficult enough. His muscles had severely weakened, his bone density had dropped dangerously, and he was suffering from multiple vitamin deficiencies. But the psychological scars ran even deeper. He woke up from nightmares almost every night. Being in enclosed spaces terrified him. Even a hospital room with the door open could send him into a panic attack. I ended up retiring earlier than planned so I could take care of him. My daughter Emma and her husband welcomed us into their home in Vancouver for 6 months, while Thomas went through intensive physical and psychological therapy. My son Marcus flew in from Calgary every other weekend to visit. Slowly we found our way back to being a family again, although the shadow of what Sandra had done never completely disappeared. It's been 3 years now since that February morning, when Kyle, the furnace technician, discovered the hidden door. Thomas lives in a small apartment not far from my new place in Winnipeg. He's gained back most of the weight he lost. His hair is still gray, but these days he smiles sometimes. He's been writing a book about everything he went through. His therapist says putting the experience into words helps him work through the trauma. We have dinner together every Sunday. Sometimes the conversation drifts back to what happened, but most of the time we focus on other things. Hockey, the news, his book, my grandchildren. Ordinary conversations. The kind of things brothers are supposed to talk about. I divorced Sandra, though in truth it felt almost pointless given that she was already behind bars. I also sold the house in River Heights. I couldn't bear staying in that place, knowing what had been happening in that basement for 4 years while I lived upstairs, completely unaware. People always ask the same question. How didn't I know? How could I live in that house for 4 years with my own brother locked in the basement and never suspect anything? The truth is, Sandra was meticulous, careful. She had managed every detail of our household for decades. I trusted her without hesitation. Why would I question where she went early in the mornings? Or why did she rearrange the storage in the basement? Or why she insisted I didn't need to bother with the Christmas decorations? Trust is supposed to be the foundation of a marriage, but Sandra turned my trust into a weapon. She used it to keep my own brother imprisoned beneath our home while I slept peacefully just 1 floor above. The part that haunts me the most, the thing I struggle with every single day, is the funeral. 4 years ago, Sandra arranged a funeral for Thomas. It was a closed casket service. She claimed his body had been recovered from a river and was too badly decomposed for anyone to see. I stood there and delivered a eulogy for my brother. I cried over an empty coffin while he was locked 20 feet below the church basement where we held the reception afterward. I mourned him. I grieved for him. And all that time, he was trapped in my basement, hearing Sandra's footsteps overhead, wondering if each day might be his last. Thomas has forgiven me, though I'm not sure I've forgiven myself. He insists none of it was my fault, that Sandra deceived both of us. But I was his older brother. I was supposed to protect him. Instead, I brought the woman who imprisoned him into our lives and gave her 38 years to plan it. Kyle, the furnace technician, still sends me a Christmas card every year. He moved to British Columbia the year after everything was discovered. He said he couldn't keep repairing furnaces without thinking about that basement. I can't blame him. He had just been trying to fix a heater, and instead he uncovered a nightmare that had been hiding in plain sight. The detective who handled the case later told me it wasn't the first time he'd seen something like this. Not common, he told me, but not unheard of. People being hidden inside homes, sometimes for years, by family members who convince themselves they're doing the right thing. He said the human mind has a frightening ability to justify terrible actions when it wants to badly enough. I still think about Sandra sometimes, though I try not to let my mind go there. She's serving her sentence in a federal institution in Saskatchewan. She sends me letters that I never open. Her lawyer forwards them saying she wants to explain herself, that she wants me to understand her reasons. But what explanation could ever justify 4 years of captivity? What kind of reasoning could make any of this acceptable? My daughter Emma keeps telling me I should see a therapist myself. She's probably right. Most nights I wake up around 3 in the morning, my mind replaying every moment I walk past those basement stairs. Every time I went down to grab something from storage and unknowingly passed right by that hidden door. Every time I complained to Sandra about the cost of Thomas's funeral, about how much I missed him, while she sat there listening, nodding, carrying that horrible secret. Looking back now, there were small details that should have made me question things. Sandra had always insisted that I didn't need to sort through the things we kept in storage. She would quickly volunteer to grab the Christmas decorations or anything else from the basement herself. Around that time, she had also started waking up much earlier than usual, saying she wanted quiet mornings for meditation before the day began. She began buying huge bulk boxes of granola bars and protein shakes, explaining they were part of some emergency preparedness kit she was putting together. Every week she brought home extra gallon jugs of water too. Looking back now, those things seem obvious, but hindsight is always clearer. At the time, nothing about it felt suspicious. She had been my wife for nearly 40 years. I trusted her completely. Thomas later told me that the worst part wasn't even the confinement itself. The hardest thing was hearing my life continue just above him. He could hear my voice upstairs, hear me talking on the phone, laughing at television shows, going about my normal days only a few feet away while he sat alone in the darkness, unable to call out or let me know he was there. He said there were moments when he almost broke, moments when he nearly screamed for help despite Sandra's threats. But the fear of what she might do to me kept him silent. That kind of love remaining silent in a living nightmare just to protect someone else is something I'm not sure I could have managed. My brother turned out to be far stronger than I ever gave him credit for. As the legal process unfolded, even more disturbing details came to light. Sandra had studied other cases of unlawful confinement, carefully analyzing where people had made mistakes. She had joined online forums about soundproofing and ventilation, quietly gathering information without ever revealing what she intended to do. She purchased supplies from different stores, always paying in cash so there would be no clear pattern. By the time Thomas showed up at our door asking for help, she had already been planning his captivity for more than 2 years. The prosecutor later said it was one of the most calculated cases of unlawful confinement he had encountered in his entire career. The judge described Sandra as someone who displayed a chilling lack of empathy and an unsettling ability to separate her actions from their consequences. Our children struggled to understand how the grandmother they had always known could also be the woman who imprisoned their uncle. Emma began having panic attacks. Marcus grew quiet, angry, and distant. Both of them started attending family therapy. In truth, all of us did, trying to find some way to understand something that made no sense at all. I learned something important through all of this. Evil doesn't always make an entrance with warning signs. It doesn't always look like a stranger or an obvious danger. Sometimes it's sitting across from you at the breakfast table. Sometimes it shares your bed for 38 years. Sometimes it pours your coffee in the morning, kisses you goodbye, and then quietly walks downstairs to check on the family member it's keeping prisoner. Trust but verify. That's what the detective told me afterward. He said it's a phrase often used in intelligence work. It means that even when you trust someone, especially when you trust them, you should still pay attention, still ask questions, and still make sure the truth matches what you're being told. I didn't do that. I trusted completely, without question, and my brother ended up paying the price for it. But if there's one thing I hope people take away from this nightmare, it's this. When something feels wrong, look into it. If someone in your life seems to be quietly separating you from family or friends, stop and ask why. If doors that used to stay open suddenly start being locked, if routines quietly change, if the person you love begins hiding things, don't dismiss those warning signs. I ignored every red flag that was right in front of me. I chose to assume the best when I should have been asking questions. I trusted when I should have been paying closer attention. The people closest to us hold the greatest power to hurt us because we've given them access to our lives, our homes, and our most vulnerable moments. Most people would never misuse that kind of trust, but some do. And when they do, the damage is devastating because they know exactly where and how to strike. If I could go back and change one thing, it wouldn't be marrying Sandra. It would be the blind trust. I would verify. I would ask more questions. I would listen to the quiet voice in my gut that was trying to warn me. Thomas is sitting across from me right now as I tell you this story. We're in a small coffee shop in Osborne Village, watching the Red River through the window. He's sipping a latte and typing away on his laptop. He can do that now, sit in public places, be around people, live in the world again. 3 years ago, that would have been impossible. Healing is possible, even after the darkest experiences, but prevention is far better than recovery. Pay attention to the people you love, ask questions, trust your instincts, and remember, the locks on doors aren't always there to keep strangers out. Sometimes they're there to keep the family trapped inside. The truth has a way of surfacing eventually. For us it took 4 years and a broken furnace, but in the end it came out. I just wish it had happened sooner. 4 years of my brother's life were stolen, before my entire marriage was exposed as something built on lies and cruelty. Sometimes the greatest dangers come from the places where we feel the safest. If this story made you think, take a moment to reflect and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy powerful, real-life style stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to A Father's Wrath for more stories that reveal the truth hidden behind ordinary lives.